Hi, this is Tiffany, volunteer for the Christian Book Fair. I'm going to review today some middle school books that are geared toward uh, Catholic. So they're more like Catholic authors writing fiction novels or nonfiction books geared toward middle school Catholic kids. So we have a number of book fairs that are at Catholic schools, and so some of these books that we would include in those book fairs, and then some of them we would not include, and I'm going to talk about why we would not include those as well. So, the first book I want to talk about is Seven Riddles to Nowhere, and this is by A.J. Catapan, and this is a great book. It is just fantastic. My kids read this book in the matter of like a couple of days. It is such a fast read because it's so enjoyable, so adventurous, and I love the character development in this book as well. Are there some elements of it that are going to be more geared to Catholics? Yes. The overall message in this story, I think, is applicable to all Christian families. That would be appreciated. I think all Christian parents would appreciate the message in the end. Of course, it the elements in terms of referencing the cathedrals, and all the cathedrals are named after saints. And it talks about mass. That there's a mass at one of the churches, and it references, I think, the Catholic Union of something that's really more regional and historical because it's set in a Chicago, which has a lot high population of Catholics, a lot of old beautiful Catholic churches there that lend well to this story, and then in the end, when you get the overall message in the end, you're gonna be like, I get it, well done, very well executed. So the okay, so let me talk a little bit about the characters. The character is really likable, just a really a sweet story about a boy that has a disability, and he kind of gets bounced around from one private school to the next private school because of his disability. And so it talks a little bit about like how teachers could sometimes judge kids with disabilities, how other students can judge kids with disabilities, and then it talks a little bit about how the other kids stick up for him, and then some of the teachers that they kind of realize that maybe they're being too judgmental and they need to change their mindset. And so a good diversity inclusion element in here that I really appreciated. It was a unique story in that regard. And so the idea is that these kids go on a adventure solving these riddles throughout the Chicago city, and then the hope is that there's some reward in answering the riddles, and it's going to help save the school. So the riddles, all the hints are clues that they find in churches, and so they go from church to church, and there's so many like icons and symbols in the church that it really kind of gets your mind going, trying to figure out the riddle, and so it's really fun like that. And I think most of them I could guess. I don't think most middle schoolers will be able to guess. After they get all the clues, they might be able to kind of piece it together. Some of them, one of the riddles was unique enough that I learned something new, and so I thought it was interesting, and so that was fun, and so you kind of think you know where it's going, and then in the end, it kind of has a twist, and then it kind of throws you for a loop, and you're like, whoa, where did that come from? And then you're just kind of really happy and satisfied with the end in terms of getting that message across. And I would have really loved to see more books like this. Um, and I think mainly because I know how much my kids enjoyed it. I think other kids would really enjoy it too. The riddles again are faith affirming riddles, and they have little faith elements in them that help kids learn about the faith as well. And the anti-bullying is really great, and being inclusive to disabled kids and not being judgmental. Again, I really loved that element. It's a good clean book, has good quality writing in terms of detail, imagery, and the story development, and really kind of getting you into the action of the story and the adventure of the story, so that you don't want to put it down. You just like, want to keep reading and reading and reading until the end. And then in the end, you're like, I wonder if she has any other books. So I loved it. My kids loved it. Um, the I think any kid would really appreciate this book. Um, so I think it would be a good, enjoyable book. I'm trying to think. Oh yeah, no, no love interest, no violence, no language, no drugs or magic. Good role models in here for sure. The next book I also liked is Rosa Sola, and I really appreciated the writing quality of this book. The story is set in the 1960s of Chicago, around a family who immigrated from Italy. So, I mean, you can imagine, obviously, it would probably be like a Catholic family, just because historically and of that region of those times, that would be expected. So, you know, I would definitely say this book would be appropriate for any Christian kids reading it on a historical level. Um, the faith basis actually is really quite beautiful in here. I think any parent reading this and this little girl's faith would just want to give her a great big hug and would be very happy for their kids to see this little girl's, how she processes and prays, and as a role model. um, so this little girl has to, deal with a very difficult life situation. There's a death in the family, and it's really tragic, and she's just really brokenhearted about it. And it's about her struggle in terms of finding faith through such a tragic thing in her life. And it's really quite interesting and gripping, because in her faith, like in the beginning, her faith is so beautiful, and you're just like, yay, kid. And then when her heart's broken, you just want to pick her up and be like, don't lose faith, don't. And but she asks a lot of interesting questions that I think a lot of people go through when they're grieving, and they're trying to reconcile their faith and God's love during difficult situations. So in the end, that beautiful positive arc comes in, and she just really, you know, becomes stronger in the faith in the end. And so overall, fantastic message. Well done. Great family values in this book. I highly recommend the story. It was beautiful. I loved it. Good job. Who was the author? Carmela A. Martino. So this again is a fiction novel, and with historical basis, and not usually the type of novel I would really go to, but at the same time, because the faith message and the family values in here were so good, I enjoyed it. I would love for my kids to read it. Great book. Another book is Made for Greatness, a growth mindset journal for courageous Catholic youth. So obviously it specifically says it's for Catholic youth. Could any kids read it and enjoy it? Yes. It specifically says Catholic because it has a number of saints in here. I think any Christians can appreciate saints. The saints are, like this one is a quote from Saint Therese of Lisieux. God would never inspire me with desires which cannot be realized. So in spite of my littleness, I can hope to be a saint. So I think that it's a really good message in here. A lot of really good messages, all, praying to God, and always, encouraging to have a heart in God. It's growth mindset as well, which I'm a big fan of growth mindsets. I believe God wants us to be trusting in Him, having faith in Him, always having hope in all things, and being positive through God's message. And so I really appreciate that somebody would put out a book like this that's geared toward Christians. And so it just kind of journals, and it has a little introduction, and then it journals, and it talks about, each one has, a theme in the beginning. It might have a story about a saint that is, something positive, encouraging in the faith, persevering in the faith. And so a beautiful story. And then it has these reflection areas that the kids can journal in, to help them to kind of grow in their faith and mindfulness, and thoughts, and having a good healthy mindset for God. And so it talks about, it might ask thinking questions, and about just fun questions, and questions about making the right decision, and then just little guided questions to kind of pull out some positivity, some hopeful ideas in the future, and some areas to grow in and to be hopeful in that. and then of course prayer. So great message, great concept. I really enjoy it. I think it would have been nice to have a little bit more references to some of these saints, or maybe some more art, because I know one of them is somebody who builds. I don't know if it's a saint or if it's just somebody who is known for like building massive Lego structures that are completely inspired by God and Bible stories and such. And so it's, I think, something that any kid would be like, oh, really? I kind of want to see that. That sounds really cool. Um, so I think a little bit more pictures would have been cool for that. Oh yeah, it's called the Lego Church Project, and I don't think he's necessarily a saint. It's just a story about somebody that uses Legos to build massive monumental structures that are, inspiring of their faith in God, and so I think kids would appreciate that. So this is really geared toward middle school or high school, teen or preteen age kids. It says for ages 9 and up. But yeah, great book. The next one is Minute Aquinas, the Doctor's Quick Answers to Fundamental Questions. This is a really thick book, but it's so deep too. It has amazing stories, and this is very philosophical and very faith-filled, lots of references to scripture. And I know my son, when he read it, like he would just get so absorbed into it, like he couldn't put it down, and he'd just be like, oh, this is so interesting. And he would just like sit, and like if I had to ask him to like come and do something, he would like walk reading with it, and then he'd get to and then sometimes he'd like share it with everybody. He'd just like, you guys got to hear this, like, and he'd just start reading something out loud, and it would just be like mind-blowing, like, oh my gosh, that's so interesting. So I highly recommend this book. It's based on faith, and a lot of the information and comes from the ideas of Thomas Aquinas, who's considered a doctor of the church. And he talks about, is God's existence self-evident to us? And it's really the hope and the courage to see the truth is hope. And what is faith? What is faith good for? And it uses references about Paul in the Bible tells us faith is the substance of things to be hoped for, the evidence of things to appear that appear not. So that's Hebrews 11:1. I think any Christian kid would benefit from this book. It's really great. It talks about virtues and the faith and willpower, and it's philosophical and great book. A couple of books that I do not carry in the book fair, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about why that is. So this is actually a really great read. This is called The Destiny of Sunshine Ranch, a novel by T.M. Gaiote. I think is how you say that. I'm sorry if I'm not saying it right. Oh my gosh, the story, the characters, the faith of the family, brilliant, well done. I'm going to talk about why, though, it's not recommended, and there's just like one point on it. So the main characters, this premise of the story is following this boy who is bounced around from one foster home to the next foster home and so forth, and the difficulties of living with foster families, of being a foster kid. The struggles are gripping and heartbreaking, and you see how these kids are so hard of heart, and it really helps, I think, to open up the mind to realize why it's so important not to judge people, especially kids. Some kids that even look or do or say things that a lot of parents wouldn't appreciate or like. It kind of gives you a different insight into why they might even do that, and then why it's important not to judge them but to love them. So there's a lot of really great lessons in here about not judging, loving, forgiving. It's really well written. It has good family values, in terms of the family that eventually fosters them, this group of kids, and how faithful they are, and how their faith really touches the lives of these foster kids, and how they all come together like family. It just is so sweet. Like I want to adopt a child now. My I I can't say enough about how good the writing is, how good the story is. Um, the message that's brought across is fantastic. So why you're asking, oh my gosh, Tiffany, why are you not putting this book in the book fair? And why are you not recommending it for middle school kids? And the reason is because we have a very strong stance in terms of dating. Teenage dating, 14, 13-year-olds dating is totally inappropriate. I understand that, what they were trying to do in this book was good, but definitely not a role model. Now, so let me tell you what happens, right? Okay. So this, very faithful Catholic boy meets one of the girls, and they decide that they love each other. They're 14. I'm like, you can't, decide on, having a, that kind of relationship in your life. You're not even considered responsible enough to drive a car, much less have that kind of relationship in your life. And to make that kind of decision that you want to spend the rest of your life with somebody and that what values and virtues go into, a long-term relationship like that at 14. So just not appropriate. And now the reaction I get is good. I understand where the author was going with this. Basically, the Catholic boy, although he kisses the girl in response, he then declares that he is, what did he say? Pure and proud was the message, which is a good message. And but they should not have kissed. Like, I can understand if the author had gone to the point of they thought about a kiss, but to actually do it, to actually kiss at 14 was no. That was so inappropriate, so immature. Definitely not a role model. I don't know any kids that kissed at that age, and I didn't grow up in a Christian home. Nowadays, if kids are starting to do that younger and younger, that doesn't make it right. So we're not encouraging that. I so and then and I can continue too with the story. So like the boy, says I'm pure and proud, and then the parents talk about like you can't date until you're 17 and you can't kiss and da da da, and the kids agree and they are totally on board with that, and so that overall message was good. But the fact that they kissed at 14, I just felt like was a really inappropriate choice. So yeah, I'm gonna say no. Too bad too, because it was a fantastic book. Loved it. Okay, the next story, also we're not gonna carry in the book fair. This is Carlo Acutis, the first millennial saint. Now his story I actually really liked. I liked the story, and there he did. This is based on a true story, so this is it is a true story. So this is a nonfiction, story about this boy who devoted his life to God and died of leukemia at the young age of 15. And it's really such a heart-gripping, inspirational story about this guy's love for and devotion to God. And I really particularly was interested in it because he's, of course, a saint of the times, and he really shows God's grace and love in being able to use social media and the internet in a good and healthy way, so that he was using those elements as a focus to share his love for God. And so that's contrary to a lot of the struggles that kids have in these days and times in terms of the temptations of social media and internet being used poorly. So there's ordered love, right, that is encompassing of God, and there's disordered love that is encompassing of worldly loves of the flesh and of temptations and such. And so I really appreciated that because I think that's such a great thing, to show as a role model of somebody who can use the internet and social media in a healthy and safe way for God. And so I'm going to share why, though, I didn't include it in the book fair. The story is really interesting, great story, until towards the end, the author just kind of out of nowhere just puts a bunch of Eucharistic miracles in here. And so it wasn't contiguous. It was just kind of like shoved in there, and it didn't really go with the story. All the miracles were of the same kind of miracle story. And I went to his website that the kid built because he's also a programmer. I thought that was cool. Um, and his website has a lot of really great stories, all devoted to God and God's presence in the Eucharist and having faith in the power and miracles of God. And the majority of them that were on there are not like what's put in this book. So I don't even think it really represents well what he was about in terms of those stories. There were stories in there that I would have loved to see in here, because I think that they're believable and they're edifying of the faith. They're the kind of stories where you go, oh, that's awesome. I would love for kids to, read about that and, be inspired. So I think one of them was the Saint Imelda, I think is what her name is. I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong, but it's a cute story. Very sweet little girl who has faith in receiving the sacrament of communion, and then there's another one. There's a couple in here that I think are not in this book, but on his website, that I think were really good. I've heard other ones too that are believable and interesting and uplifting of the faith, which is to me key, right? The ones in here are not really uplifting in the faith. If any of them ended in a miracle or of healing or grace or love or changing of hearts, conversion of hearts, that would have been really interesting. But they're all about these Eucharistic miracles where the miracle is said to be that the communion actually has blood and flesh in it, which is kind of not really what I think the point of the communion is, right? So the idea is that life, we depend on life from God, and God's presence in the communion, and that power of life is from God. It's not from flesh, right? And that was kind of the turning point of a lot of disciples, because they didn't understand, because they couldn't think outside of the flesh. And so so I don't really get why that would even be edifying the faith. And I'm sorry if I don't get it. If you're Catholic and you're reading this or listening to this and you're like, no, I get it, please share. That's fine. We all would like to, learn more about the faith. But for me, I felt like it's really about, having faith in that life comes from God, not flesh of the world. And so I think the story actually of the miracle associated with this guy was way more inspiring, ironically, than the miracles that they put in the back of this book. So he died at 15 from leukemia, and I guess they had what are called relics, or maybe it was his tomb or casket. I'm not sure, probably not casket, tomb, something. They had basically an event, and there was a boy that was there who had been sick all his life, who was diagnosed with a serious illness at birth. And the illness was so severe that he couldn't even have surgery to correct it, I guess because it made him so malnourished that he couldn't have surgery. And his prognosis was very bleak. And the story is that after, suffering all his life with this illness, he came to the presentation of the relics of this boy, and was immediately and completely healed of all his ailment. And it was physiologically, as well as the side effects of the illness. So he was vomiting all the time. He couldn't eat, and then his pancreas was had issues, and so they could see that everything, the doctors could see everything was healed. And so it was very miraculous and very fantastic and compelling story of healing. And so that story, which was more interesting, and I loved his story, that he was sharing his love for God on the internet, and showing how that the internet can be used in a good way and in a healthy way, and not be not using it in a way to that would be tempting to the flesh or sin or anything like that. So as much as I wanted to this book, I wouldn't recommend it because it seemed so, the stories that they use, the examples in here, I just didn't really feel like it coalesced with the story or the message very well. And it didn't seem like as edifying as a message as the other ones. Like, again, like if they saw like blood and flesh on the Eucharist, and then somebody was healed, or somebody was filled with God's goodness and faith and love, and whether it's healed mentally or physically or spiritually or whatever, there was none of that. So it wasn't, to me, that would have been edifying the faith. Just seeing some slaughtered blood is not really of interest, I think, or I don't really see how that would really inspire kids in middle school, or teen kids. His story was inspiring. I just think it was unfortunate which Eucharistic stories they put in the back. So, as much as I wanted to like this book, I'm not going to recommend it. But, and I was looking specifically at this book because I was looking for millennial saints for Catholic book fairs, and then and so I did want to follow up with, there are really great saint books. This one is like Chronicles, and it has like graphic novel, and it has a lot of action that I think middle school, high school kids would appreciate. But really great stories with good messages and family values and devotions to God, and giving up everything that one has to be able to serve God and to help the least of these. There's this really cute story about Saint Jerome helping the little orphan children, and their dialogue with the little orphan kids was pretty comical. So a lot of really great stories in here. I would recommend instead a book like this for saints. I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you have any comments or suggestions for other books, please share. The next review is going to be general like fiction, fun fantasy books, whether it's fantasy or dystopia, or knights in armor, or kind of sci-fi fantasies. And so I look forward to that, and God bless.